Hi, and welcome to the Restorative Wellness Clinicians Corner, video series exclusively for functional health professionals, where we interview the top experts in the latest research, products, tools, and best practices for getting your clients exceptional results. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Clinicians Corner podcast. I am so happy to have you here. This episode was just a delight to record. I got to talk with one of my favorite people, Dr. Joan Rosenberg, who, as I share when I welcome her, has had such a grounding and profound impact on me whenever I interact with her. This conversation, I gotta say, it was gold. The live audience was absolutely in love with Joan. It is hard not to be, honestly, as she busts through these concepts of imposter syndrome, why self-doubt is so damaging. She shares some powerful turnarounds in our language. And some of these, I got to tell you, I use all the time and just love. She gives us practical, tangible practices that we can use on the daily to shift our space when we're feeling, as let's face it, all of us do sometimes, small and unworthy. If you listened to the episode we did with Bo Eason, this is a perfect complement as Dr. Joan helps us step by step get out of our own way and step into that bigger vision that we talked about with Bo. And if you haven't listened to that episode yet, I highly recommend it as well. These two go beautifully together. Enjoy. Welcome everyone. I am super excited to be chatting with one of my favorite people tonight. We have Dr. Joan Rosenberg with us in the house. She is a PhD psychologist, a best-selling author, corporate wellness consultant, and media expert who is also an acclaimed speaker and trainer on communication, confidence, resilience, authenticity, and grief. She is a 3-time TEDx speaker, member of the Association of Transformational Leaders. She's been recognized globally for her work in innovative emotional mastery and confidence building. And Dr. Joan has been such a powerful and grounding force in my life. Oh, I want to make sure she also great author of one of my favorite books, which you all should get, is called 90 Seconds to a Life You Love, How to Master Your Difficult Feelings to Cultivate Lasting Confidence, Resilience, and Authenticity. Outstanding book, incredible resource. I use the strategies from that book every day. So I first ran into Dr. Joan at a bunch of different events back. It was like 2018, 2019. And she was really often brought in at JJ Virgin's Mindshare events. Also, she was at Bo Eason's Personal Story Power event. And she was hired to come and support the practitioners at these events and the entrepreneurs at these events, really to create a safe space and create a touch point, for people when you're doing deep transformational work, whether that's under the auspices of entrepreneurial journey or speaking or anything like that. It's probably no surprise to all of you that stuff comes up, right? And I think it really speaks to the wisdom of some of these folks like JJ and Bo, because they bring in Dr. Joan to create that safe space and create that as a resource, because really things do come up. And we had met in passing, we had chatted. I always thought she was really lovely. But my first and very poignant memory of, a very deep connection with her was at my very first mastermind retreat. It was in Hawaii. Do you remember this, Dr. Joan?
I do. It's very vivid. Yes.
I had just joined JJ's mastermind, and I mean, to say I was intimidated is like the understatement of the year. I was completely and utterly overwhelmed. I had recently just stopped drinking alcohol, which was definitely what I will call my confidence crutch. And in that community, I felt like to not have a glass of wine in my hand, I just didn't know how I could do it. And so there I was, like swimming in all of these feelings of like, I don't belong here. I'm not successful enough. I'm just so scared to show up as like my authentic self. And there was Dr. Joan. We were all getting ready to go out to a dinner. And just her presence, I just just spit up all this stuff that was happening for me. Just like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling so nervous and I'm going to this dinner and all these things. And honestly, I can't remember specifically what you said, but it's that thing where people won't remember what you say, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And I can just remember, like, she just looked at me straight in the eyes and put her hand on my shoulder. And whatever words she said, just like, it's like everything just, my shoulders came down, my feet sunk into the ground. I like rejoined my body again, and all was well in the world. And I felt so seen and so validated and so safe. And she and I have since done some trainings together that have put both of us in really uncomfortable spaces. And I walk in the room and I think, oh goodness, oh, Dr. Jones here is okay. I'm going to be fine. So thank you for being such an incredible presence. And thank you for coming here and sharing your wisdom with our community.
Well, Margaret, I feel blessed to be a friend of yours. So I'm honored and blessed by the opportunity. And anytime we can do something together, it lifts my heart. So.
Well, I want to kind of pick up from where I was, at that first mastermind retreat,
Okay.
feeling
All
all
right.
sorts of I don't belong here's. And, I think we classically call this imposter syndrome. And a couple of weeks ago when you and I were chatting, you shared you have a very different idea of this. And, a recent conversation we just had was with Bo Eason, another mutual friend, and, a fantastic inspirer of big things, right? And so he really got us all kind of riled up about dreaming bigger and going for it and just like chasing these big life dreams.
Right.
And while I completely agree with everything he said, and his inspiration has been responsible for a lot of big, bold moves I've made in my life, I have also had that feeling after sort of stretching myself into this big dream of that contractile moment of like, oh my God, who am I to do this? They're going to find me out. I am such an imposter here. I don't belong. So I really want to unpack this because I think that I know I'm not the only one. There's a whole syndrome named after this, which I think you're going to help us unpack. So let's talk about this imposter syndrome thing and what happens to us when we start to try to expand that sort of natural contractile tendency.
Great question. And for me, there's so many different layers to this. So if you'll help me remember for me to come back to the am I, will I questions,
Yes.
I would like to do that as well.
Great.
But let me start with this whole idea of imposter syndrome. The two women that identified this idea around people feeling like a fraud or an imposter, two female psychologists were the essence of it is that they were noticing a trend among high achieving women that they would, even though they had all these achievements, they would somehow still experience themselves as a fraud.
Yeah.
So, and call themselves a fraud. So the interesting thing, there's two pieces here that we even right there to unpack. One is for me that also takes us the route of harsh self-criticism. So that's a second thing for us to potentially unpack. And what they did is they called it imposter phenomenon. So it wasn't a syndrome.
Right.
It was a trend. It was a phenomenon that they were noticing, right?
Yeah.
And somehow over the years, it's turned into this thing that people call imposter syndrome. So the first thing I want to say is, excuse my poor language here, there ain't no syndrome.
Right.
Right? So that's the first thing. The second thing for me is that when I consider this idea about being an imposter, there's only one group of people that I would say it's legitimate to say, I feel this way, or I think, and in fact, I would change the language to even, I think this way, not I feel this way.
Right.
So it's, I think I'm an imposter, not I feel like an imposter. And so the way I would first have you start to think about it is think about it from the standpoint of knowledge, skills, experience, aptitude. Maybe those are enough to start with. And knowledge, skills, experience, aptitude, and that what the people that would most feel like an imposter would be people who have low experience, low skill, low knowledge, and low aptitude when they're first going into something. But if we look at something and they go, well, now we're gaining knowledge, we're gaining experience, we're gaining, right? Then we're gaining skills. I don't think I use the word skills. Then what should happen is that experience of fraud, or that sense of fraud, that thinking fraud idea, should go down because all the other stuff is increasing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense for a starter point?
It really does. And I want to emphasize two things that you just said. Number one, the fact that this isn't a syndrome, and I'm going to generalize and, kind of gender stereotype here, but, as I think there's a lot of almost like medicalizing a certain just uncomfortable feelings that anyone can have. But I think as females, we tend to then, or I don't know if it's we or others, I don't know who did it. I don't know. I'm not going to point any, we're not going to sort that out now. But there is this tendency globally to like sort of, make it a syndrome, like a thing. So I love that it's just like, it's a phenomenon, it's experience. It happens. It's not, because a syndrome immediately assumes there's something wrong with you, right?
Right.
And so we've just taken that off the table. There's nothing wrong with you. And now we're taking it and making it something very objective and quantifiable, and not something that's like a personal, like I as a human being am not worthy. It's something that I can acquire. It's skills, it's experience, it's knowledge. These are all things that exist out there that we can go do. It's not about our inherent worth as a human, which I think is also a tendency, I hate to say it, as women, as females, we tend to just sort of make it about our essential being, as opposed to just that we might not know as much yet.
Exactly. So if I'm going to rename and look at this in an entirely different way, because I don't believe in it, it's all about vulnerability. Entirely about vulnerability. It's my willingness to be vulnerable and to put myself out there at whatever level my skills, my experience, and my knowledge are.
Yeah.
Right? And then for me, there's many different kinds of things that go into this, because we can move from low skill to and no sense of competence to, again, more skills, knowledge, and experience, and then move to being moderately skilled. We can move to highly skilled. We can move to expertise. We can move to mastery. Right? So there's really a trend that we can move. And at each of those points, depending on what we're doing, and we put, again, anytime we take a risk, we're choosing into vulnerability.
Yes.
So then we might not feel like we fit at the new level that we're attempting to move into, especially in light of the big dreams you were talking about. Right. So for me, and there are things that go into it. It's I think that if we're not vocal about and speaking up, and people don't know us, or they know far less about us, then we're going to feel more vulnerable and then we're going to identify more as a fraud, right? Or we launch into harsh self-criticism, which is massive for it's massive for everybody, but I think women do it more than men do it. And so same thing, then and when I say change it from feeling like a fraud to thinking that you're fraudulent,
right?
There's a reason for that, because when you say you feel like you're fraud, now you're launching into self-criticism, and same thing with thinking as well. But for me, self-criticism is also a distraction from unpleasant feelings.
Yes. I want to come back to that in just 1 second. I want to really unpack this idea of fraudulent, or fraud, feeling of a fraud, thinking I'm a fraud. Because what I'm really hearing here is it's when we're feeling that discomfort, we're feeling, as you described, like the vulnerability and the tension kind of the gap, right? I want to be here, but I'm here. And in order to get here, I have to start like doing the things that the people who are here do. which
Right.
is there's gonna be this tension between where I actually am, where I want to be, and then the getting there. And that's a really vulnerable place to be because we're learning, and it's funny, I watch my daughter do this with things. Like, she does not like to learn in front of other people. I don't know that any of us like to learn in front of other people. We want to be really good at it, like that. That whole messy middle is not very fun. And certainly in some of these business environments where it feels very public and very exposed, that messy middle can feel even more vulnerable. So I think there becomes, and I want to unpack this piece around the fraudulent piece, because there's a lot of messaging that we get of like, fake it till you make it. Or, if you don't have that experience yet, how can you stand with confidence and say, like, I can help you get this result when this is the first client? Just this putting it really in a practitioner's mindset. Or, how can I charge when I haven't, when, like, how do we get over that piece? I think there's this sense, and I want to keep bringing back to this, the fake it while you make it, because I feel like that's a piece of the tension. Like, there's this necessary gap, there's a necessary just overcoming it. It's vulnerable in there, and we don't want to lie, right? Like, or mislead. And I feel like sometimes that can be, and I hear the piece about the self-criticism, because I think sometimes our inner voice is far harsher on the reality than what's actually happening and how other people are seeing us. So that's a whole other piece. But I feel like part of this tension is this desire to be very present with what is, and not, it feels like it's misleading to be living into what will be, because that's the dream and it might not be there yet. Does this making sense, or am I confusing?
It makes total sense. So let me see if I can respond to that. So think of it as fake it till you make it is I'm totally vulnerable from this gap to this gap. Right? So in essence, we just call the fake it till you make it my vulnerability period.
Right.
Or my most vulnerable period.
Right.
Right? Because we're going to be vulnerable the whole journey.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what level we get at. We're always going to be vulnerable because most of us will dream of the next thing.
Yeah.
So great. So it's probably my most vulnerable because I'm first starting out.
Yeah.
So if we go with what about my knowledge if you're my first client? What about what I'm going to choose to charge because you're my first client, or my first 7 clients or 20 clients or whatever it is, and those kinds of choices. Then we can also take, the beauty of it is, Margaret, is that we can take our vulnerability actually into the experience with us. And we can acknowledge that it's like, you know what, you're in my first set of clients. I've been trained, I have this kind of certification, et cetera, and yet I just want you to know I still feel a little awkward about, I just want you to know I'm still on the front end of my learning curve.
Right.
And now we've taken ownership of that vulnerability. We can ditch the fraudulent because we're being honest.
Yeah.
So honesty and transparency can make a difference. You just build it into the conversation as it's appropriate to the situation.
One of the ways that I have coached people, and I would love your honest feedback if this is good advice or not very good advice, has been to really lean into what is within your control that you can do. Like saying, here is the situation. There's a lot more about the human body that we don't know than what we do know. And what I can commit to you is that I will do everything in my power and everything that I've learned to help you get to this goal. I can't guarantee that we're going to get there, but I'm going to do everything in my power. So it's not a lie at all. It's not, but it's committing to what you can control, which is then not, because if it's like, I can guarantee you this clinical result. I mean, that is a lie. None of us can guarantee that, but we can guarantee that we are going to lean in and we're going to use everything we have learned and that we're continuing to learn. I will sometimes say too, if it's really complicated, I've got great relationships with people that are way smarter than me. And if we need to bring them in, we can, so that can be, so is that a way of kind of speaking to it that still builds confidence in the person you're talking with, but that's not It's not lying.
It's not lying at all, and the beauty of it is that then what you're basically saying there is, I'm going to help you to the limits of my knowledge, experience, and skills
Yeah.
without using those words.
Right.
And what you're also saying is, I'm going to ask for help, which is another way to push back against that vulnerability.
Yeah. 100%.
Right? So
Well,
honesty and transparency, asking for help, being more open. Now we're starting to put decreasing self-criticism. Now we're pushing back against imposter syndrome.
100%. Well, let's lean into this self-criticism thing because, I'll tell you a story. When I first met James, who is now my husband, when he first met my parents, I will remember I met him later in life. I'd had many relationships. Let's just leave it at that. So they were skeptical, to say the least. And so they sat there at dinner, sort of, arms crossed. And I remember my dad goes, "So James, if you could change one thing about Margaret, what would it be?" And I was like, oh man, I talk about not letting him off easy. But James, to his credit, immediately goes, "Oh, if they're 100%, I know what it would be. She's so hard on herself. I've never met anybody so hard on herself." So I just want to say, self-criticism, if there's like a master's level or a PhD level in self-criticism, I think that I have earned it. So I really want to unpack this because I know that this is one of the things that can hold us back the most, and that can really, it can totally warp our perception of where we are, just in a room of successful practitioners, for example, or in it can force us into these really weird corners. And sometimes you see the manifestation of somebody aggrandizing themselves as an overcompensation almost, right? And then there's that person who just plays small and holds back, and as a result. So let's unpack this. And as part of this, I would just so love practical strategies that we can do when we catch ourselves in this, to catch it and then
Right.
to shift that. Because I feel like, again, it's probably partly because we're in a profession that's largely women. We're all pretty darn good at the whole self-criticism thing, and I think we're in it for the healing piece, right? And so sometimes some of the businessy stuff can feel like not why we were here. So it adds complications, let's just say. So what do you think?
It's very interesting. Just very quick story. Hopefully, I'll make it quick. I realized I had an insight about harsh self-criticism and now how I have viewed it, really, frankly, believe it or not, since the 1990s. I was working with a graduate student at the University Counseling Center at UCLA in Los Angeles, and this was a chemistry major who was getting his doctorate. And we were talking about his frustration and frustration getting as his advisor further along in his dissertation, whatever it was. And all of a sudden, everything that we were talking about shifted to his description of how inadequate, how worthless, and how undeserving he was. And I'm sure that there are any number of people that I can hear that conversation going on.
Right.
And there's way more to unpack with just those three things as well. But I was like, in my head, I'm going, how did we get from frustration to unworthiness or deservedness? So if you stop and think about those three words, unworthy, undeserving, and not worthwhile, or whatever, inadequate, all of those words are evaluative.
Yeah.
So what caught my attention is that if he was in an evaluative mode, he was thinking, he wasn't feeling. So what dawned on me at that moment was that to be engaged in harsh self-criticism means you're distracting from unpleasant feelings.
Interesting.
And the best quick example I can also give around this is when I was doing a podcast actually with somebody that you know. He could hear me, so with a colleague, and he could hear, I could hear him, he could not hear me. And what ended up happening in that situation is that because that trouble was happening, and we hadn't started the podcast or the interview at the beginning, he was, he started to go on his computer, and you can imagine he's trying to figure out the sound on, and then I watch him go into the desk, and so we know he's pulling plugs,
Right.
right, to fix it, and I hear him say, "I'm so embarrassed." But without missing a beat. So embarrassment's great. Okay, chill. I'm fine. It's all good. You can be embarrassed. I don't care. It goes quickly,
Right.
but without missing a beat. So it wasn't even a nanosecond. The next words out of his mouth were, "I'm so stupid. I'm such an idiot."
Oh.
So what I want people to understand is that "I'm so stupid. I'm such an idiot" is the thought hijack of the unpleasant feeling.
Right.
Just like inadequate, undeserving, and unworthwhile, or whatever is also a thought hijack of unpleasant feelings. So what I want people to think is that harsh self-criticism is a thought hijack of unpleasant feelings.
And I think this is a really important moment in case people aren't familiar with the sort of core of your work, which you're speaking to right now. This idea of 90 seconds and feeling the actual feelings, which sounds oh so simple, and yet is just remarkable what antics we will play to avoid such uncomfortable feelings. That's a great example. Can you just speak to this concept of feeling the feelings, and so that we're understanding all together,
right,
why distracting from the feelings is such a big deal?
Again, layers. So the first thing is to understand that most people, when they feel something emotionally, feel it through bodily sensation. And so if you find certain, and it can be true for pleasant feelings as well, but mostly it's unpleasant. If you find certain unpleasant feelings really hard to bear, it's probably mostly because it's hard for you to tolerate the physical sensation that helps you know what you're feeling emotionally.
Can you give an example?
Sure. A disappointment was very hard for me when I was younger, particularly if I reflect back on my high school years. And I think the way I experienced it was a heaviness in my chest, and then a downward experience when the disappointment. So sadness was at the heart,
Yeah.
like a heaviness at the heart, and then and disappointment was that heaviness plus kind of a downward sinking into my gut sensation. It felt way worse. So I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And again, it takes you starting to notice what bodily sensations are attached to what emotional feelings. I talk about 8 very quickly. For those who, if this is recorded, can go back to the recording. It's sadness, shame, helplessness, anger, vulnerability, embarrassment, disappointment, and frustration. So one body of my work is centered around these 8 feelings, and how they're really the foundation of us being able to have confidence and resilience and so much more. So then, in order for people to not hijack their feelings, one is to notice when they get lost in harsh self-criticism, remind themselves that oh, I'm into distraction mode. And then what you want to do is it's almost like reversing a car. You want to back it up and you want to go, what was it that happened a moment ago or a few moments back that got so uncomfortable for me that from a feeling standpoint, that I wanted to move away and started to be mean to myself as the strategy for dealing with the unpleasant feeling. And then you take a breath, you identify whatever that feeling is or feelings are, or were, and then the whole approach has to do with leaning into, if you will, riding the waves, because we feel it as a bodily wave, bodily sensations, bodily wave. Then we want to ride those waves of unpleasant bodily sensations to be in touch with the feeling. Let me add one other piece here, Margaret.
Yeah.
People go, why do I have to feel it anyway? I don't like it. Why do I have to feel it? Think of feelings as a repository of knowledge. It's a resource pool, just like thinking is a resource pool, just like bodily sensations are a resource pool, or an intuition is a resource pool. And what you want to do is you want to be able to join your access to whatever it is that you're feeling with thought and reason so that you can make better decisions, you can speak up, or you can take action. That's why feelings are so important.
That is so powerful. That is so powerful. All I feel is just the sense of calm at knowing, if we can back up. It is kind of amazing how quickly feeling happens. Boom, we're already into distraction. Like when you say that, like take a minute to even figure out what it was. I think we have all become such master distractors, especially in this like wildly distracted world, that we don't even notice that there was a thing we're distracting ourselves from. So that's like step one, is like taking that step back.
Right.
But then that feeling, just the idea of being resourced in those moments and having access to, as you said, thought and reason and the emotion, and the feeling, the physicality, the feeling of it all at once, looking at it as a resource as opposed to this thing we have to suppress. And, it's so interesting talking to clinicians, as we all are here, is that, in the functional world, symptoms are our clues, right? Like they're so important. We're not just trying to shut them up. We're trying to, they are a resource in so many ways. So I love that we're having this conversation about this from the physical discomfort of of a feeling is a resource, and let's stop demonizing and just trying to run away from them and actually embrace it, because there's so much in there. This is so good. And I'm going to just say this, for a really deep dive into this stuff, I highly recommend Dr. Joan's book, The 90 Seconds to a Life You Love. She goes really deep into this with some great tools and strategies. And as I said, I literally use this on a daily basis. These concepts are with me all the time. They're so helpful. So bringing it back to self-criticism is that mental antic that distracts us.
Yes.
And hijacks. I like that word, that hijacks the feeling.
Right. Yes. There's more I can go into it.
Please.
I can talk about
one quick second. I'm just seeing here, Belinda has a question. She's asking, they are resources or resource pulls? I think that's a really important clarification.
Well, if you want to make it really simple, it's information. It's a source of information. So that's you want to be able to have access in the moment, understand that they're transitory and they're fluid. They don't last. What lasts, if you feel like feelings linger, then what's happening is that there's another process that's taking place, because feelings are transitory. They do not last.
Yeah.
But we want to be able to have access in the moment so that we can, like I said, join it with other bodies of knowledge that we have, or other sources of information that we have.
Okay. The Clinician's Corner podcast is sponsored by Restorative Wellness Solutions, the premier clinical training program for health practitioners who want to learn how to finally get to the root source of their clients' health concerns and help them reverse complex health challenges and chronic illness. You can't afford to keep guessing. Your clients can't afford it either. Today's clients are sicker than ever before. Their health histories are more complex than ever before. And you simply can't deliver the results they crave or build the practice you desire without the right clinical skills. Enter Restorative Wellness Solutions' foundational course, Mastering the Art and Science of Gastrointestinal Healing. Our clinically proven, systematic approach to restoring balance within the body that has helped over 1,000 practitioners transform their clients' lives, grow their business, and change the way health is delivered. In less than 12 weeks, you'll develop the clinical skills and confidence you need to help your clients feel better faster. Learn how to work with advanced lab testing to identify food sensitivities and imbalances within the gut. Craft custom targeted protocols that truly resolve your client's gut issues and work safely and effectively with supplements to deliver consistently life-changing results. Visit masterguthealing.com to apply today. Okay. So if we catch ourselves in that self-criticism,
Yes.
what do we do?
Well, like I said, you notice, you reverse course, and you go, what was the thing that kind of was provoked me or evoked me or triggered me? See if you can identify that. What are the feelings that I experienced with that? Let yourself stay in that process, and then, given the situation, see if you can kind of ask yourself a question. Is like, okay, how do I want to make use of the disappointment I feel, or like, what's this disappointment about? And how do I want to make use of it in relation to whatever I was reacting to?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So now you have to bring the context of the situation in which it occurred. You have to notice what was going on around you, to then to bring the feeling back into play. But it's not about criticizing it, and it's not about doubting your own experience. What I watch is we doubt our own experiences.
Jill is asking, does this work for anxiety as well? And I'm wondering if we can like run a scenario. I think, anxiety is certainly one that have a lot of experience with as well. So if, I'm thinking of, that moment of like maybe wake up in the middle of the night and just like heart racing and feeling, I know there's physiological reasons for that as well, but there's that, the mind racing, the sort of running scenarios over and over, looping, the monkey mind that we talk about, and just feeling that sort of like, I know for me, Jill, I'm not sure what anxiety feels like for you. For me, it feels like I sort of can't catch my breath and everything's like right up here and my throat feels really tight and I don't like it. So if we're in that kind of a moment, what would like the coaching would be?
Well, again, I'd have to unpack the specifics, to be fair.
Okay.
But the first thing to understand is that, especially with the kind of stuff in your throat going on and the racing heart, the first thing to do is actually physiological or body oriented, and that is to take deep breaths.
Yeah.
Right. So shallow breathers tend to be more anxious. Deep breathers tend to be less anxious. So first things first, it's especially if you're experiencing a lot of bodily symptoms, it would be to shift to deep breathing. That is the single most important. It's paradoxical. Slow, deep breaths are the fastest way to calm, or is the fastest way to calm.
Okay.
So that would be the first thing. Second thing is, I'm not a big fan of anxiety, just like I'm not a big fan of harsh self-criticism.
Okay.
And for me, anxiety is distraction,
Okay.
just like harsh self-criticism is. Anxiety is mostly distraction from unpleasant feelings.
Okay. So waking up in the middle of the night or whenever it is that those anxious feelings start to come in, we take the big breaths and kind of get our physiology a little bit more on side. And then is it to try to feel like, what is it that's triggering this? What is making me feel unsafe?
Right. Well, it could be unsafe. Could be vulnerable. I have to go do a presentation tomorrow. So, right.
Yeah.
So now I'm anxious.
Yep.
So then another way to think about anxiety is that it's trying to have mastery over a feeling that has not yet occurred.
Ooh, say that again. I'm right that one.
Anxiety is trying to have mastery over a feeling that has not yet occurred.
Oh, wow.
There's a third, if I want to give a third definition, it would be that anxiety is both unexperienced and unexpressed feeling.
Say
So
more about that.
for the people that are listening, I would say stop and think of, if you would describe yourself as having, in quotes, having anxiety or being anxious about a given situation, stop and think about whether you are allowing yourself to experience the vulnerability, if that's what's part of it, or whatever other feelings might be present. And if you are not, then the first thing to do is to allow yourself to experience, and then you ride those bodily sensation waves for a short period of time, 90 seconds or less. And then the second thing is, if it involved another person, are you expressing yourself about whatever it is you're thinking about, or whatever the distress is, so that you're not carrying it and it's actually being expressed and dealt with. And if you're not, then for me, that's a reason that you get anxious, is because you're neither letting yourself experience what your true experience is.
Right.
Sadness, anger, disappointment, vulnerability, whatever it might be. And you're also then not expressing it.
Right.
What I have found, if I shift gears just a little bit in this anxiety piece, two other things that I would add to this, and it also links up with harsh self-criticism. If you ask questions like, am I capable of doing this? Will I achieve the thing I want to achieve? Will I accomplish the thing I want to accomplish? Can I really do this?
Yeah.
Right? Do I have the skills? The am I, will I, can I, do I question. What I call the am I, will I, can I, do I questions. What you're doing is fostering doubt.
Yeah.
Doubt to me is a subtle form of harsh self-criticism. And it also kind of fosters this anxious experience.
Right.
Right? So the thing to do here is to actually switch that up and to change the order of the words, oddly enough, so it's I am, I can, I will, I do.
I love this so much. I think just that simple switch. I love that flip. I used this. We had a conversation about this a few months back, and I was at the early stages of training for my running 50 miles to celebrate my 50 turns around the sun. And I have never run anything longer than a marathon, which is already pretty long, and this is almost double that. And I was feeling a little bit freaked out. And on training runs, I had moments where I was like, can I even do this? And I flipped it and I said, and what I did, again, kind of going back to the not lying and being honest, but flipping it to the I can, it was like, I can always take another step. I can go as slow as I need. I have 3 months between now and the day to train. I can, and I just would list, and I would do that. That was my mantra as I was doing my training runs. I would just come up with a list of as many things that I can do. I can stop whenever I need to. I can sit down if I need to. I can take a nap if I need to. I can always keep going. I can, I can cry if I need to and still run. I can throw up if I need to and still run. Like and that would be what
That's
I would
great.
do. I remember one run I spent maybe 2 or 3 hours because I was doing long training runs of like 5 hours. Literally just, I can do this, I can do that. And it became like a game. It was like, what else can I do? And as opposed to this, like, oh, can I? And I love the way you have connected these pieces from the harsh self-criticism and breeding the anxiety to something that is true and empowering and in our control, which I think one of the things with so much of this is that feeling of out of controlness that can just be like, it's so hard to kind of wrap our arms around it and wrap our arms around ourselves in that moment. And so that's a super powerful tool. I love that. So flipping am I to I am. Will I to I will. Can I to I can. And do I to I do. I love it so much. Now, is this, one of the pieces we were going to talk about tonight is the importance of communication. And is this kind of the connection of this piece? Because, here we're talking a lot about ourselves as clinicians and as business owners, stepping into the world and our conversations with ourselves, but we're also having conversations, of course, with our clients, with colleagues, with, for some instructors, with students, there's so many different layers to this. So can you help us bridge that and like how the communication piece steps into this?
Well, same thing. I would say that our use of our voice to speak more broadly, and I differentiate between speaking and communicating.
Yeah. Okay.
Because most of us have the capacity to speak. That doesn't mean that we communicate well. So part of it is making the differentiation there, and that's a whole nother conversation. But I see our capacity to use our voice as probably the single most transformative instrument we have, or strategy that we have.
Tell me more.
It's what I have found is that when somebody moves from being quiet to being willing to take the risks to say what they think and they feel and they need or they sense or whatever it might be, and begin to put themselves out in the world, it transforms them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'll again, the observation came from kind of, if I think back on sorry, I've got too many thoughts going. If I think back on my early life as a psychologist, I, like so many others at that time, would say, you need to assert yourself, you need to speak up. How do you assert yourself? You speak up. And speaking, interestingly enough, is our first line of defense. Mm. Especially when we get older. Yeah. More so physicality as a child, but right. We want words as adults. Yeah. But people don't always use those words. Yeah. So our voice can be used to protect, our voice can be used to connect, our voice can be used to create. Mm-hmm. It's true for feelings as well. But what I was doing at that point is I wanted people to be able to use their voice to say what they wanted to say so they could get what they wanted. Right. Right? So it would be to either have something stop, or have something start, or have something change, or whatever it was, or to enroll somebody in the dream that I have. It doesn't matter. But it was, you were going after a particular goal by using your voice. And so I was lost in that. But as I got actually into the work centered around the unpleasant feelings, what I realized is that people don't speak up. And like the way I like to frame it is, difficulty speaking up is not a speaking problem. Mm. Difficulty speaking up is a difficulty with unpleasant feeling problem. We're back to those same 8 feelings. Right. And why? Because I feel vulnerable if I speak up. Yeah. Right? Or I feel vulnerable and I'm going to tell you about my disappointment in something that happened between us. Or I'm going to be vulnerable and I'm going to ask you to help me with something and I'm afraid you might say no. And now I have to deal with sadness or disappointment or something because of that. Or I'm embarrassed that I even asked. Right. So that's what speaking is all about. And so what I realized over this time is that the getting what we want when we speak, in whatever form we're seeking it, is the benefit. It is not the goal. Right. And the goal of us speaking up is to evolve ourselves, is to grow us. That's the real purpose of us speaking up. It's to grow us. I love this. It aligns so much with just so much of what we do, is
that notion that, I always say, the entrepreneurial journey or just owning your own business is, it's one big old personal growth exercise in disguise as business.
Totally, totally.
Right. And
Yeah.
so I love the way that it's, that speaking for that growth. And this is reminding me of a conversation we had about shyness,
Oh, right.
because this is very connected in as well. And you have a very radical notion of what shyness is connected as well. So can you share your story about how you came to this, and then what shyness is, how this fits into this puzzle? Because this is a piece of all of this as well.
Yeah, no, it's true. And so if anybody knows my story has to do with me being a very, very shy child. I mean, the way I would describe it is that if you're familiar with wallflowers, I was Velcroed to the wall. So I'm really, really shy, and coming in with the themes of I don't fit, I don't belong, and everything around inclusion. Is somebody gonna, do I fit into this, and can I be included? So I was actually teaching at the University of Southern California at the time. I don't think anybody was around, and so it's not a big story in that way. But who knows why I was thinking about whatever I was thinking about at the time, and but I was started to think about shyness, and all of a sudden it dawned on me that shyness was a desire for someone else to be vulnerable first.
Yeah.
So in most cases, it's not temperamental. It's no, you be vulnerable first. You say hello to me first. You ask me how I'm doing first. Right? Now the ice is broken and now I can talk with you.
Right. Right.
As opposed to me having to initiate. So it was like the moment I realized it, it was like, oh my God, I have to do the initiating. And so it changed how I viewed myself. It obviously changed how I view the idea of shyness at all, or this idea of being reserved. Again, do I totally get it in terms of temperamental or physiological or a whole wide variety of other things that go into it? Of course.
Yeah.
For the great many of us, it's really centered again. Once again, is I don't want to be vulnerable. You do it, and you do it first.
And that ties in with this idea of speaking up, even if speaking up is simply walking over and saying, "Hi, I'm Margaret." Something that can seem so simple, that the reason for doing that is not just the icebreaker and the, making it more comfortable for you. It's the growth moment in that.
Absolutely, absolutely, 100%. 100%. So for those who are listening who would identify as being shy or reserved or that sort of thing, my thing is just go experiment.
Yeah.
In fact, experiment with all of it, and just test it out and see how it lands for you. And I've just had the opportunity to watch over, in this case, decades about how things work. But I would say go experiment on your own and see what works. And if you are on that shy reserve side, then my thing is test it out today or tomorrow or the next days. And just if you're less inclined to initiate, go initiate. Yeah. Do one a day. And make it small, do one a day or do two a day or something like that. Just push yourself to do it and watch what happens for you.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. This is a great thing for anyone who is going to like big conferences or events or anything like that. I know I definitely, the wallflower, I was so like just scared of other kids, especially adults for some reason, seemed totally fine. But as a kid, other kids were just like the scariest things on the planet. And I can sometimes find myself just like all those like I just turn into a 8-year-old at the playground again, right? Looking around and feeling like I'm not being included and whatever. And then if I can just get out of my own head and do the exercise. Like I'll just do something like, you know what, you're going to go introduce yourself to 5 new people. And there's nothing in it other than the exercise of introducing yourself to 5 new people. And often what I have found is I get to like 2 and then we get into such a great conversation that I never even get to the 5 because it's just,
That's right.
it has opened up. But I think I love the way of thinking about this as growth. This is such a good complement to these ideas that we had with Bo Eason. And for those of you who haven't listened to that conversation, we'll make sure to include in the show notes of the recording of this. We'll make sure to link back to that because these two conversations are just like sisters, just like hand in hand, because these are the nuts and bolts. This is the boots on the ground of
Right.
how you actually start living into that big, wild, audacious dream. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens by introducing yourself to 5 people at a party. Like it's
Absolutely
really,
true.
right? Like
Yes.
it's these little incremental pieces. It happens when you have the anxiety and you notice the feeling and you think, okay, this is a distraction. What's really going on here? What am I feeling? What triggered this? Using this as information that
Right.
you can
Yep.
then, it's a resource. Once it becomes information, then you can make calculated decisions. Things don't become reactive or knee jerk, right? And then, just everything goes more smoothly when we are resourced, which requires that, I think emotional intelligence is this term that also gets sort of thrown around. And I don't
Mm,
know, if you asked me to explain what it is, I'm not sure I could give you the proper definition. But I think what we're talking about here today is the most important element of emotional intelligence, of really understanding the relationships between these things and understanding how important it is to be able to like sit in it, embrace it, experience it, not run away from it,
right. Right.
and work with it.
Right.
You know,
Right. And think of emotional intelligence as the basis of it is really a good emotional self-regulation. So, what are we talking about when we're talking about that? Our ability to experience and
yeah,
express
yeah,
feeling without whatever we're experiencing disrupting our functioning.
yeah.
So, yeah,
So I want to just recognizing we're needing to wrap
sure.
up here in a few minutes. I want to talk about because with these feelings, you know, um, we're talking right now again about the clinicians themselves. I really want to support these folks to get out there and
Sure.
incredibly important work they're doing.
Yep. Yep.
Also comes up, of course, with clients, right? We will see that clients will avoid feelings and that this piece, this sort of unwillingness to experience that discomfort can actually interrupt their physical ability to heal, right? So
Yep.
do you have any just tips without, of course, these are not PhDs, these are not psychologists mostly, but any strategies for sort of some things to listen for when they're talking with clients, and then some resources that they can, suggest. I mean, I think the exercise you recommended here of the am I, can I think that right there is an incredible tool to use with clients
Oh,
because they
absolutely.
will say, like, how can I do fill in the blank? How can I live life without gluten? It's like, well, let's flip it around. I can, and then let's have a conversation about all the things you can do. I
Right.
think that's a
Right.
really good tool. But
Yeah.
what are some other things that they can be listening for, and then how can they can support their clients with this?
Let me be a little bit more direct with it.
Yeah.
Give me 2 or 3 things that the clinicians will hear, and then let me give the response to it.
Okay.
What would be
A scenario. If
common
anyone who's
objections
here in
that
the
a
live audience, you want to throw a scenario in the chat, please feel free. There's one. Giving up sugar.
giving
There's
up
no way
sugar?
I can give up sugar. And now, when they say that, I depend so much on sugar for, I mean, people lean on sugar as their coping drug, right? So
Right.
that would be a time where sort of that feeling the discomfort of not not eating the thing that they wanted. And I think we could sort of, of course, sugar is a big one, or any kind of like fill in the blank of their favorite food that for whatever reason they're not
Right.
able to do that.
So the first thing to keep in mind when somebody says I can't, it's I won't or I don't. So what you can say back to the client is it sounds it's because nobody has their hands like roped and or is
Yeah.
preventing them from doing whatever, right? And we know that.
Yep.
It's entirely a mental shift. And then not just doing the mental shift. There are things that we can do environmentally to move it out of our house. There's things that we can do emotionally to have other people support us and say, please don't do, you agreed to not do that. We can have accountability partners. There's all sorts of things that clients can do.
Yeah.
So that one would be to have a variety of other suggestions. But the first has to do with shifting the mental set or the mental attitude is that I can't.
Right.
And I can't, like I said at the start, is mostly I won't or I don't.
Right.
And so the thing that you can say back to the client is that sounds like you at this point in time you're not going to, right? This is a won't. It sounds like this is a won't. I won't do it as opposed to I can't do it. Could we say that's true? The client's probably going to say yes. Of course it is.
Yeah.
And that you don't want to. Would it be fair to say that you don't want to and that you won't do it?
Right.
And the client says yes, then the next step might be, can we chat about your decisions around that?
Right.
And so that's one that can be worked with.
One of the things,
If that's doable for,
yeah.
okay.
One of the, I think those are great suggestions, and kind of digging into that and getting the clarity of what they're actually saying, because people often say, yeah, and I can't is like, oh, it's not my choice, right? It's like it's an external versus I won't, or
Totally.
I won't is like the conscious choice, and then that's a conversation about exactly as you said. One of the things that I have had clients do, one of the programs that we often will do as a starting point is basically we call it our rebalancing diet, but it basically pulls out like the heavy hitters, and it's a big sort of blood sugar recalibration. And people go through some serious withdrawal. And I will often encourage, people, we eat for all sorts of reasons. Only a tiny little part of it is actually for like the nutritional value and the caloric value of the food. So many other things. So when I have clients who really struggle around these kind of cravings and things, I have had them just go sit and feel the feeling that, because it's, I studied with Mark David, who did I'm sure you know his work. And he will talk about the fact that we will eat in those moments. We're either eating to feel something or to not feel something. Right.
Correct. That's right.
And so, what do you think of this idea of something? Again, please tell me if I've been doing harm. But I've encouraged people to, in that moment where they feel like they must eat the thing, right? Like it's just this, like, I've encouraged them to, maybe you can eat the thing, but what I want you to do is set a timer for, and I think I used to say 5 minutes, maybe that's too long, but just to like sit and like not have the thing and see what you are feeling. Like, see if you can just identify what it is that you are wanting to feel or not feel as a result of eating this thing.
Yeah. So
And then,
yeah,
they
I'm
can
sorry.
eat
Go
it
ahead.
after. It's not about sort of muscling through, but I've used that as a first step. Do you think that kind of a strategy can be really helpful, kind of leaning into this feelings piece?
100%. I used to, when I was at UCLA, my primary responsibility was working with people who had eating related disorders.
Right.
So yes, so I'm very familiar. And I would say don't take 5 minutes, take six times that.
Oh, great.
So my thing was that I wanted or 4 to 6 times. I wanted people to step back. If they had the desire, the urge, this strong urge, it would be to step back, and they had to move away from whatever the thing was or not go near it. And I wanted them to sit and do one of three things, and it would be for 20 to 30 minutes, and at the minimum. And it would be to sit and to think about whatever was taking place that prompted them to want to eat whatever it was. The second was to journal. So it would be to go out beyond just the thinking part.
Right.
And now let's get it out on paper or on computer, or however somebody, documents stuff. And same thing, you want to write about whatever's going on that's prompting you to tie this to the urge. And then the third is to call somebody. And so the more ways someone can experience and think about an experience, whatever they're going through, including talking about it and writing about it or drawing about it, they can or play the piano about it. I don't care. The more you can move something from an experience to expression, then the better it's going to be for the individual.
I love it.
So yeah, but I would expand the time. I would not, it's not a 5-minute thing for me. It's a 20 to 30 minute or more time thing.
Oh, that's really good to know. I thought I was being cruel by making them sit there for so long. So that's excellent. I like the fact that it's expanding, as I think that's a muscle that we build, is just learning to also to tolerate the discomfort. I think that's I think about that with my kids a lot. Helping them build that muscle that sometimes things just don't go your way. And that's
Right. Yep.
learning to be okay with that and feel the discomfort of it, but just be with it.
One of the single most important lessons a parent could teach a child.
Yeah. Not an easy lesson.
is how to handle unpleasant feelings, is to be able to experience and express.
Maybe that's why I'm wondering. I don't feel like my parents tried to jump in and save the day with me very much, but I do know that those uncomfortable feelings, it's kind of amazing what we will go to, the ends we will go to avoid them. Oh, this has been, so we're going to have you back. The chat is blowing up with people already wanting the replay so they can come back and listen to it, and have you back again to go deeper into some of these conversations. This is, I knew this was going to be a fantastic conversation. Thank you just so much for your wisdom and your guidance and the practicality of this, and how it all comes back together. I think this is just such great wisdom and so many great strategies here. So for all of you listening, yes, what can you do when you find yourself saying, I can't? What can you do? Because you can. There's so much you can do. And yes, Dr. Joan, thank you so much. Now,
yes,
we were just talking before this, if this is something, I asked Dr. Joni, does she have a practitioner program? Does she have any kind of support? She said, I'd be happy to support. So we are going to put our heads together a little bit and see if there is something, especially seeing the response of everyone here, just really loving this. We will see, Dr. Joan and I will put something together. We'll think about how we can support you all as a group. Because this work is so important, and really having you all just get out there and support your clients and fly that big dream like we talked about. It's just critically important. In the interim, drjoanrosenberg.com is the hub of all the things. 90 minutes to a life.
No. 90 seconds.
90 seconds, 90 minutes, 90 seconds.
No.
Whoa, too many. 90 seconds to a life you love, amazing resource. And if you want to go into like those 8 feelings and the science behind, how that wave of the feeling, the physicality of the feeling that we were talking about, and just strategies for supporting that, an invaluable resource, great for your clients as well. This is one of those things, I feel like it's just a must read. And we will link to all the socials and all those kinds of things. Thank you so much. Any last words you want to share?
Well, you know what I did is I actually pulled up the questions on my side.
Yeah.
So if I can add just a couple pieces before we start.
Oh my goodness.
So Belinda said, are they resource pools? P-U-L-L-S? No, it's P-O-O-L-S. So like a pool, like a body of knowledge. Right. So I want to make sure that's clear. Yes, of course, with anxiety and anxiety, it's not unexplained and unexpressed, it's unexperienced and unexpressed.
Important clarification.
And if I add one other piece there, it's not that people are, and here's the great distinction, Margaret, for your clinicians. It's not that people get afraid of doing the thing or the activity that's tied to the outcome they're seeking. It's what people worry about is the emotional outcome, not the. So if the result doesn't turn out the way I want, can I handle
Interesting.
the emotional outcome of the result not turning out the way I want? That's why people get anxious.
Which makes the
that's why
vulnerability so much more vulnerable.
and we're right back to the same unpleasant feelings.
Right.
It doesn't change.
Yeah.
So that's why the being able to handle those unpleasant feelings is so important. And then there might be one other one I was going to. Our voice can be used for what three things? To protect, connect, and then create. So. So what can I say? My biggest thing is what I would say is notice what landed for you as you were listening, and whatever landed strongly, pay attention to.
Yeah.
And then go, like I said earlier, go experiment with the ideas, and see how they land for you, and then if you can, get better at experiencing and get better at expressing. Because those two skills, and I see, it's also understanding that I see experiencing feeling, expressing feeling, and creating relationship as skills.
Yeah.
So get it kind of, if you will, get it out of your head that there's stuff that we're just kind of God-given and we can do just automatically. No, they're skills. We have to develop them.
Right.
So go test it out.
So much goodness.
That's my ending. It's a challenge.
Challenge. I love it. Well, we have a challenge accepted over here, and
Okay.
thank you so much for
My
all your
pleasure.
wisdom. Thank you, everyone, for your great comments and contributions in the chat for our live audience. That's wonderful. And we will see you all very soon. Good
Sounds
night,
great.
everybody.
Thanks again, Margaret.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joan.